All right, let's get you back to what is happening in Oregon right now. Now, moments ago, we heard from this group behind this armed takeover of this federal building there. Here they were.
Many of you have asked us for what is our name, and other than just citizens that care and feel like it's time that we make a stand to protect our human rights, we didn't really know what to say. But we felt that we'd give ourselves a name, at least so that we can be reported that way, and we could be more organized in that effort, and that would be Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. Our purpose, as we have shown, is to restore and defend the Constitution.
Well, my next guest here is wondering why this armed group has not been labeled as insurgents or terrorists. She is Janelle Ross. She's a reporter at the Washington Post. So Janelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
All right, so I'm going to get to your point. I think you make an excellent point in this piece. But first, I don't know if you were watching. We took it live. I mean, here you have this group that apparently now has suddenly given themselves a name. I talked to someone who lives in the area, and they're all sort of like, we don't even really know who these people are. They're armed to the teeth. They're hunkered down in this federal building, which is illegal, holding a news conference. Is this a little bizarre for you?
Well, in all fairness to the people who are assembled and, under a newly announced name there in Oregon, they are American citizens and they have the right to protest and assemble and exercise their right to assemble. What probably makes this situation most noteworthy and different, whether that's acknowledged or not, is that at least some of the people are armed. In fact, as they have sought to I suppose, explain conditions there in Oregon. Many of them are heavily armed, but also prepared to stay in place for years and have said that they would be prepared to die in the event that someone tried to come in and remove them. That is a sort of several steps above a peaceable protest to which they do have a right.
Okay, so to your point, why aren't they being labeled terrorists? Why?
In all fairness, I think that there are many labels that might be applicable here. I think the real question is, why is there such speed to labels such as terrorist or thug or any other number of labels when those involved in protests or even those who are interlopers on a peaceful protest, I guess, are on Americans' TV screens. At the same time, there seems to be this real reticence and sort of slow pace at which we arrive at the point at which, for instance, in South Carolina, after events there last year, a mass shooting, there was extended debate about whether that was even a racial crime and then whether or not that was domestic terrorism. And meanwhile, we do have a significant issue in this country with domestic terrorism. It outpaces just slightly Islamic terrorism, which we spend a lot more time talking about. And then, therefore, I'm saying to you that again, there may be many words that are applicable and reasonable here. Some people may feel that the proper word for what's happening in Oregon is terrorism, perhaps sedition, insurrection, etc. But we don't use that word because we are talking about white Americans who are presumed to be innocent. They're presumed to be individuals with their own minds and their own opinions that don't apply to an entire group. And we certainly don't assume them to be violent from the get-go.
Well, I think words are important, I think, from a law enforcement perspective, from a charging perspective, and just from a societal perspective. I want to just quote you because you make this point. It is hard to imagine that none of the words mentioned above, particularly insurrection or revolt, would be avoided if, for instance, a group of armed Black Americans took possession of a federal or state courthouse to protest the police. Black Americans outraged about the death of a 12-year-old boy at the hands of police or concerned about the absence of a conviction in the George Zimmerman case have been frequently and inaccurately lumped in with criminals and looters. You also make the point if it were a group of Muslims as well, this would be a totally different story.
I think so. It seems to me, based on recent events, that at minimum, the progress at which we would get from wondering what happened and what might be motivating these events to a series of very serious and in some cases deeply insulting labels being applied to people automatically because of who they are, not because of what they are doing.
Janelle Ross, Thank you for taking the time with the Washington Post. I appreciate it.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.